Très bien.
Okay, we're now going
concret,
to talk in more concrete terms. Of course, what Ricardo said was quite concrete as well, but it was more an introductory speech, a way of talking about the different contradictions and get people who disagree to talk to each other. That was very good. And now we're going to talk more about the heart of the matter with two people who I admire very much, who have been working hard for many years, despite the fact they're very young. And they work on exactly this question of cultural incubators. They manage what I consider to be incubators in any case. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about these two concrete cases of what they do to exactly understand what we're talking about, because of the cultural incubators, very interesting. Everybody wants to be involved in this kind of activity. These two ladies are managing true, real incubators, but they're very different and in very different contexts. So it's going to be very interesting to compare the two. Lucie Sanchez, as her name does not indicate, is working in Italy and is working in the ASTER incubator in Italy. Perhaps you could just say a couple of words quickly about what ASTER is in the city of Bologna. ASTER has been one of our partners several times on different European projects, and we often work with you with great pleasure. So, Lucie, yes, ASTER is a public body. It's the Agency for Innovation and Technological Transfer in the Romagna region in the north of Italy. ASTER is based in Bologna. We have about 70 people in our team, so it's a big organization, big agency, and the agency has been in existence for 30 years. It's been around for quite a long time, the same as A.M.I. The Italians are always ahead of everybody else in that sort of area, yes. So basically we work on several different aspects. Most of the work, it consists in creating contacts between the more traditional businesses and research. For example, we help the region create a number of industrial research labs, which have nothing to do with creative industries, which didn't have anything to do with that originally in any case. And our role is to define the innovation policy for the region. Over the last few years, we've been working in the sphere of creative industries, not really with artists as such. And so, in fact, for example, we have helped the region define their intelligent specialization strategy. The Romagna region identified a number of strategic sectors that they wanted to support, and one of these sectors was culture and creativity. At the moment, what we're doing in this particular area is to get all of the different players around the table in this sector and try to define a new policy in the area, for example, of financing for this sector, also in the area of the attractiveness of companies from other regions, and also for business creation. So one of the areas we work in also is training. We organize a lot of training for researchers in general. And finally, another area where we are very active is helping people create businesses. I work in the startup section of ASTER, helping people to create startups. Over the last few years, we have set up a number of different programs to support people who want to create their own business and make a living doing that. Since 2010, we have launched a program in the area of creative industry with different European projects for creating startups. We did a market survey, first of all, to identify which sectors had the strongest presence in the region, to identify the economic value of these sectors, to encourage the regional public authorities to support this sector, which is quite important in the region. And then we also set up a number of programs lasting for different periods of time, depending on the amount of funding we have. We work almost solely with public funding from Europe, or also local funding. We have some funding coming from the region to develop a range of stable, permanent services. For example, we provide reception services. We also are going to have an area where we'll be able to house the businesses. The city of Bologna has given us an area which will be opening next month, which is in a big park. There are several buildings and some greenhouses as well. And we will be launching a program to accelerate the creation of startups, which will last 6 months. There will be areas for new entrepreneurs in the creative sector, but also people working in the area of the environment, because as it's in a big park, it will be appropriate for that. Not just for creative industries. So there we are. But we've been working for a long time on setting up services and also financing, because in some programs we also give people funding as well to set up training courses as well. So we have a whole package of services that are personalized according to the type of program we set up. It can be in a specific sector, for example, the environment. It can be in creative industries as well. We've had several of those. For example, we had one in the audiovisual sector. And then we find the specific partners in the sector to provide the knowledge that is more specific to the sector. But all of the organizational side is our specialty. When the people you are helping, are these business, are the artist entrepreneurs? When you say creative industry, going back to what we were talking about earlier, are these artists who benefit from your programs? Yes. For example, I've taken a few notes to give you an idea of the kind of people we work with. For example, we have a business that had a program with us a few years ago, which is still continuing because the program doesn't end when we stop supporting them, but we continue to give them information about the new funding they can obtain. We organize a lot of events that they could help them get in contact with more traditional businesses. So we do continue to keep in contact with people after we've stopped funding them. This is a company based in Bologna, which was created by 4 people who did the fine arts school at Bologna. It's called Aperiti Filmere, and they did something called architectural mapping. So what they do is they produce films which are then screened onto buildings. Urban mapping, yes. Yes, these are projects that take place as part of communication campaigns. And they've worked for some very big names, such as Pepsi and Ferrari. And do they do their own creative projects as well? Yes, they also have creative projects as well. It's a collective of artists. That's what they call themselves. They like that term of an artists collective. They tried to combine the more artistic side and also the more commercial and necessary part, which is necessary. And so they do have creative projects as well, because of course the videos they create are different each time, and they are artistic videos. And it's a business that runs very well. It works right around the world. That's a good example. Perhaps another example? Yes, another example, which is fairly conventional for us, is a crowdfunding platform for music called Be Crowdy. It's well known in Italy, not very well known outside Italy, unfortunately, but there we've had several projects with them, similar to this one. But that's the one that works the best. Then we also have another one, an association called Open Design Italia, which came to Marseille a few years ago when we organized our event in C34. This is a group of architects who organize events lasting a week, a design week, the kind of independent design exhibitions. And I've mentioned them because they are looking for designer projects from anywhere in the world. If anybody here is interested, I can put you in contact with them if you want to work with them to participate in these exhibitions. They are organizing an exhibition in Vicenza and in Venice in June, I think. So that was a few examples of what and the kind of projects we organize. I have a tricky question for you now, a little bit complicated. Is ASTER a democracy incubator? You don't have to answer. Is it, what I mean is it purely functional, or does it have a broader social role in the region, in the city? Are there principles or guidelines, a kind of ethical idea behind it, or is it just a case of profitability? Well, first of all, it's a public body, so profitability is something we always have to bear in mind. We have to do that, but it's not really our main objective. The services are usually provided free of charge. Another positive point is that in our field there's a lot of private sector involvement, a lot of incubators of by private programs have a more commercial approach, where these are acceleration programs that people participate in, and straight away they have to be able to sell themselves. So that's the idea of a startup, yes. And since we're in the public sector, it's not really our main objective. So for us, the idea is to find the best strategy and find the best customers. Is the idea to remain in place, or to try to avoid a kind of brain drain that we see everywhere? For example, in Lebanon. Oh, do you have this role also of developing the local territory as well? Yes. As we are a regional public body, we work with projects in our region, and we try to make sure these activities give opportunities to people so that they can stay in the region. And often they are people who have come to Bologna University to study, or from other areas or other countries, and then they decide to stay in Bologna, and this gives them an opportunity to do that, and they create their company in Bologna, in the region, and they find their customers in the region too, and they find opportunities. So that's another role we have. What about the international side, international relations, apart from Europe? No, we don't really do that, no. We did something with Canada. That was just a one-off, really. And in the Mediterranean world, no, not really. The Arab world, no. Not at the moment. In the past, we had some projects with North Africa, but not at the moment, no. At the moment, we have some projects in the US. One of my colleagues, who is over there, who is based over there in the US, and who is developing activities. She works in Silicon Valley, and we organize a program for startups in the region who what about business canvassing trips? Yes, it's a kind of study visit, a way of getting in contact with investors, but it's really a question of training rather than real canvassing for prospects. Okay, thank you, Lucie. Now we'll move on to Marion. You have your microphone. Oh, Marion, so you're a completely different case. You're at Kër Thiossane in Dakar. How many years have you been there? Kër Thiossane is an art centre, first of all, which is started in 2002. I founded it with my husband, who's from Senegalese. So it's a private sector initiative, yes. It's a private initiative that uses public funding as well, which has started, which we tried to work with digital arts because we realized there was a strong need initially. There were a lot of artists in many different areas, a lot of creativity and a lot of festivals. But in 2002, in the digital arts, I'd worked in the Friche, and there were digital arts I saw in the biennial here in Marseille and elsewhere. And there was no real fine arts department that was able to support artists properly. So it was also a way of creating a space to enable artists to use these digital arts techniques, but in a Senegalese way. This was with the support of the via Trans-Europa Foundation and with the Eastern European countries. We always work in networks. In Belgrade, we heard about the Daniel Anglois Foundation, which uses new technologies. These institutions helped us. It's important also because it's better to reach out and not stay only in a French context. So we created this area in a private center, and gradually it's built up over the last 10 years or so, because we had to train the artists and also train the IT people and IT developers. So we have very good computer engineers, and we had to train them up as well to work with digital arts. We had a space for multimedia, and we also made some choices to decide on our policies and use the right tools, because there was also a need to enable the Senegalese to be active players and not just passive. The idea was to work with the art-sensitive research centres, and we also have a critical way of looking at the technology sometimes. How many artists do you have in residence in your centre? First of all, how many workstations are there, for example? It's gone up very quickly. It goes up and down. We started on a small scale with a small team, and sometimes we have more people, sometimes less. It depends on the level of funding. It's really very much project-based. We've always had a minimum team of 3 or 4 people, and when there's a festival, we have the Afro-Pixel Festival. Could you tell us a little bit about Afro-Pixel? This is a festival which is really rather avant-garde in a way. It's really been a groundbreaker in Africa. Yes, as I was saying, we have this critical way of looking at new technologies, working in a network with other people. In Finland, you have the Pixelake Festival, which was taken up locally, also in Denmark. And so we thought, why shouldn't we have an Afro-Pixel Festival with this, working with arts and society and books as well. So always using new technology, but as I said, we also want to take account of traditional Senegalese culture. It's a way of combining traditional practice and digital arts. We do lots of other things that aren't linked to digital arts as well. It's digital technology. We have an art centre as well. So we work with the latest technologies, but we also want to remain in contact with the local community as well. We're very much anchored in the local area. My husband grew up in the neighbourhood. So we're very much interested in the relationship between arts and society and the transformation of society through arts. So, and modernity and tradition as well, yes. That goes back to the discussion we had yesterday with Vicky and Akel. Yes. Yes, the projects. You were talking about the projects, yes. We've organised a lot of residencies. We support artists. When I was talking about we don't identify ourselves as an incubator, but the artists come in every day. We have centres. We have the Goethe Institute and the Institut Français. So we work with them as well when we can. We also organise functions in the evenings in our centre as well. And the artists have a lot of needs. They need to present an application for funding, or they need help to get visas. That takes a lot of time. A lot of artists require this assistance. We do a lot of training, so a lot of... we've been able to work over the long term with some ups and downs, so a lot of artists are often students from the School of Fine Arts, and we're able to open them up to other disciplines through our network. So a lot of people have been through our centre who share their ideas. It's a kind of forum for discussion as well, and for sharing practice. So it's an incubator. It's an incubator. Yes, that's right. Over the last 10 years, in the end of 2011, we had the Social Fund in Dakar, and Communitic from Montreal asked us to work on a project called the Remix the Commons. This was a resource platform with a video on the commons. We define ourselves as a commons ourselves because we have a lot of people providing resources and training, and are able to learn from their contact with artists. So the exchange goes in both ways. So this theme of the commons interested us, and we started asking what this actually meant. For us in Senegal, there's often a confusion between commons and public commons. And we worked on that with videos and artists, and the concrete commons, and also the commons in the more informal sense. In a city like Senegal, we organized some breakfast discussions, and this was very successful. We did it in Tomakumba, in the region outside Dakar as well, and we're able to show our videos in Germany and elsewhere. But then we said, when we had our 10-year anniversary celebration, we had our Afropixel festival on the Commons as well, with a lot of discussion and workshops on the role of art with Achille Bimbe and Simon Janme, and writers. There's a lot of discussions and workshops, and as we just finished a program with the EU, which we'd found rather exhausting, we didn't feel very comfortable with that. Why was that? Well, it enabled us to do a lot of things, but it's complicated. When you're working with financial backers, you don't really understand what we're doing. I'll go back to this later. We are always looking for partners, but the partners have to understand what you're doing. It was a cultural industry project, and we didn't really see ourselves as fitting with that. Often people in Brussels didn't really understand our reality in Senegal. So after that, after 10 years, we tried to start again with talking about the commons in the public space. And there we had the support of the Don and Evos Foundation on a platform called Arts Collaboratory. We have several centres in Dakar working on this project. And we have 25 centres around the world, including Indonesia and Kazakhstan. So we work as part of a whole community. And thanks to these partners, we're able to launch the Commons School with a Fab Lab, with a digital manufacturing laboratory. We wondered how a Fab Lab would work in Africa. We had a participatory garden for the artists, which we set up in the neighborhood. A participatory artistic garden. What is that exactly? Well, we asked people in the neighborhood what they thought the commons were. We're in a neighborhood that used to be a middle-class neighborhood, which was laid out by Senghor as part of the public development initiative. It's become rather dilapidated now. The gardens are becoming more and more dilapidated. Everybody was worrying about it and complaining about it. So we organized this participatory garden. We invited the artists to come in and set up their Fab Lab there. We started from nothing, and there was a lot of conflict initially between the local community and the artists. Over the last 2 years, we've been able to build up this wonderful garden now. So we work not only with artists, but also with the makers and people who have projects. Another role of the incubator is how do you support all these projects and encourage young people to participate as well. We also work with the community centres, and co-creation is very important for us. So to go back to the theme of today, we find it difficult to really define ourselves as a cultural incubator. We prefer to call ourselves a co-working space. A lot of artists come in and we support them as best we can, but it requires a lot of time. We help to produce them and integrate them into our networks. We have a whole structure with the local institutions as well. We didn't really see ourselves as having an economic role, although, of course, we do have to handle a lot of money. When you have a project with the EU, it's several thousand euros. So it's a big economic factor. We didn't really see ourselves having that role. The challenge for us really is now is over the last 10 years, maybe you might have got money one time from the local mayor's office. It was only 500 euros, and now the challenge now is to be able to get recognition for our work from the local institutions and start to understand, so they can understand what is happening. People don't understand what digital art is really very often. It's a question of combining different disciplines and getting people to meet up. There are also a lot of projection from outside as to what digital art in Africa should be like. There are some rather strange ideas about that. And so our challenge is to ensure that the institutions in the local area who are starting to organize themselves can support what we're doing. This is the work we're doing little by little, but which requires a lot of time. You have tremendous energy. I admire you. I've been to your center. It's absolutely amazing what you're doing.
Lucie, so what do you think of what Marion talks about? It's not the same context. Well, there are some comparable aspects between both our activities, more than we would tend to think. For example, we also have Fab Labs. We created a network of there are Fab Labs that were created spontaneously by private actors in the region. We tried to give them a little bit of visibility, involve them in international networks. We accompany them in events. We organize events, specific events for them. So we give them space. It's in line with what we do. And we also provide services. This may seem to be of a general order, but we can also contribute in the simplest things, like, for example, in the participation to candidacies. We adapt to the needs, probably a lot like what you do, or what you have to do. So I found that there were things that we share in common. And then in the new space we have now, there's also participative garden. You exchange digital salads and radishes. We also have a startup that does fruit and vegetable distribution the world over, coming from Italy. So what I found interesting, I like to go back on the support that's supported by Dun with the Kyrgyz and all these people, Indonesians. Can you describe how this works? You know, this network. There's no leader there. No, we're defining. It's a major challenge here. We've asked the IVOS. No, it's the Dun Foundation today. It's basically the Dun Foundation that supports this. We're no longer defined as a traditional network. We're all actors, but these are places where we decide the funding, the financing. We have a certain amount for over a 3-year period that is guaranteed. So we put this in common. We have projects together. We try to do some self decisions and do projects along with everybody. So this is very close to the utopia we were talking about earlier. Sometimes we talk about free licensing, free software. In Dakar, a lot of people want to do startups. They're on models that no longer work here in Europe, startups that have no future. But talking about co-working, the share economy, utopia, art as a political tool, democracy, all these. That's how I define myself, as an art center, and sometimes to work in a network with people who share the same values. Very, very important for us. So very interesting, but it takes time and energy. But the first meeting was in Colombia, the second was in Indonesia, the third will be in Kurdistan. We organized the last one in Dakar, in fact, in Senegal. And the next one will be in Kër Thiossane. So, you see, it's really, really interesting. Congratulations. So the story of sharing the means in common, we talked about this with our partners 2 days ago. It's an interesting idea, rather to think about crowdfunding, microbanking, but the idea that you can put the money in a pot, for example, and then one by one we'll use this capital that we will re-inject afterwards. But even work ecology, we're all under pressure. We all work, but to be able to take a sabbatical, if you want, to support each other. That's so there are places like Ashkelawan, very different locations. In fact, in Lebanon, we're supposed to have the last meeting in Lebanon. Sometimes it's difficult, like in Jerusalem, for example. So take care of each other, support each other. Questions, ladies and gentlemen? I knew there would be a lot of questions. We'll hand over the floor to Emmanuel first, Since Colette already had it, it's Emmanuel's turn. So, hi, good morning. Briefly introduce myself. I'm a member of the board of A.M.I, and I've worked for 11 years at A.M.I. And so I'm obviously very interested in the questions on issues of artist support and professionals of culture. The question I want to ask both of you, in fact, is that for the moment we see a lot of incubators which are being set up in the world over and in Africa. And I'd like to know how, or what is the difference, where you position your work. For example, in this world of incubators, do you accompany creators or creative people? The incubators, of course, support the creative sector, but is it for this reason that we set differences, or are there other elements that could explain how you can work differently with a view to the cultural sector? Well, as I said, until now, we didn't define ourselves as an incubator. In Dakar, there are incubators, and we need them today, but there are not that many incubators. There are co-working spaces in Dakar. There are proposals for incubators. So, as far as I know, it's just to make a space available to people. There's a meeting room, for example, made available. It's a very traditional incubator, and there are projects that come from the outside. As I said, for example, Gaieté that proposes ready-made models. In Dakar, you have the Jocolab, which is a co-working space, and there's the city, which has 2 incubators. Personally, I think we're working with the city now, and we'd like to accompany creators, creative people, but with this artistic democracy dimension. But I think it'll be different. It's beyond just the simple fact of offering space. I don't want to talk about models I don't know, but accompany projects in time, in the long run, and related to the territory. We need to. We're trying to have ties with banks like BNP Paribas, how to get loans, how people can become project bearers. They don't have to be cultural, artistic, but they need to correspond to the territory. It's territorial dynamics here that we're looking for. Well, what sets us apart? Within the scope of general incubators or incubation, or what could be different between our activities is, in fact, we have a specific program that can be, as soon as we get funding, then we can implement the project practically instantaneously, because we have all the contacts, the training that is already modeled, so we can launch an incubator program in very little time, because we've been doing this for several years, and so we're experienced. We already have a network of advisors that can be modelized, because that's the way the programs work. There's a first training, a few days training session, then the people have access to a few days of, let's say, consulting services. So it's a package. You're entitled to 5 or 10 days, depending on the funding we have. And then we work with the project bearers to define what kind of advice they should get, or consulting services. Then we have different training programs, one on the definition of a first on a product offer that we can readily test with a group of potential clients. So we have the methods. The methodology is down, and everything has been coded and tested. So in very little time we can implement the program. But it's standardized. Now you can't move things too much. No, you can. You have a certain leeway. For example, the consulting service days, we don't decide on that. It depends on the requirements or the needs of the people, but it exists. The organization enables to adapt and to be very flexible. And at the end of the program, we have an event where we present the projects with an organization model, which is different from networking events, a little bit like you did yesterday, but in different contexts. See, we have several models. And each time we organize these programs along with partners of the sector, so we can also make the specific know-how available, enable people to establish new contacts, find new clients, the first clients. So this is what differentiates us compared to some people who would start working on incubator acceleration programs. So we already have this experience, so we can readily easily implement programs. But what we do provide to creative people is often we bring together technical skills along with creative skills, because we have a lot of engineers. In the past, a little less, but we've had companies created by engineers who have the technical skills, but not necessarily the contents to apply these competencies. So it's often interesting to bring this together. It's something that works pretty well. For example, this company, Marion, we had established a contact with a startup created by engineers. They were working on sensor systems, sensor devices in greenhouses, for example. And so they were able to present a project to a museum that wanted to do an exhibit on science. So we installed these sensors so that people could interact with videos using this sensor device. So it's the same. That's the specificity we have, is the diversity of the profiles of people that we have 40 square meters, but you'll have computer programmers, coders, engineers, all kinds of people. So it's really a cooperative where you mix skills, in fact. There's the experimental aspect, and it's totally transversal. Colette? Somebody else? Andre, after. Colette. Hi again. Just a quick question. Who do you work with in Indonesia? Because I was, last year I went to a summit that's called Transforming Kink, a collective of artists based in Jakarta. And it's an international summit, in fact. It's the first edition, but it's already an international event, and it should again be organized in 2016, and the idea of transforming King is based on this Fab Lab that is in Jakarta, aiming at bringing together initiatives and giving more thought to a specific economy. And so I'm very much interested by this idea of École des communs, École des communs, common school, I think in Bologna. Common school, and with us in the cities, we're thinking about other categories that are of schools that are neither public or private. So common schools, that's very interesting. And another person based in Asia, in Thailand, Michel Bowens, founded the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, who is reflecting on this creating an economy based on sharing, not only peer-to-peer, but sharing in general. We tried to have Michel Bowens, but he's someone we're very much interested in, but he couldn't get him to come. André, who do you have in Indonesia? Who do you work with? With Rangrupa in Jakarta, but also Yogyakarta, ONF, and Life Patch. So they've dispatched in 2 Fab Labs, and we work with both. André, please. Of course you can speak in English. Huh? Je ne peux que parler anglais. Bon,
but they can do it.
Okay, cool. I think Marion said something about the partners need to... That's good. The partners need to understand what you're doing, and you also spoke about the problems of working with the EU. So I'd like you to elaborate on that a little bit. We're starting out with formalizing an incubator with A.M.I. So when we get back, we need to start thinking about partnerships, where we're going to get the money, how we're going to get the money, and how we're going to build the internal partnerships. And it's very complex because we have this international partnership, Libya, Morocco, South Africa, and Marseille. And we need to fix that partnership. And then Ferdinand always talks about the issues of word cleaning.
Yep.
So beyond just the word cleaning, what are the difficulties you experienced in managing partnerships?
Difficulté, management du partenariat.
La gestion du partenariat.
Enfin, locaux et internationaux.
Ça va être long hein, si je raconte.
It's going to take a while. If, after, the EU enabled us to do a lot of things, but we can discuss that with Daba also. But at the beginning it was very difficult, and we had to get the NGO status, practically impossible in Senegal. And we did many things, but in the end, I figured, I'll never work with the EU anymore, because we were working on things they didn't even know about. So there was a call for tenders that didn't work out well because delayed payments, training in Brussels. The trainer says choose this option outside the contract. 2 years later, we say, no, it doesn't work. So the call, we lost 20,000 euros, and this can really make you go bankrupt. And I said, I'm not jumping off the roof because of Europe. And at one point, I raised the cancellation clause issue. And then, you need to work with partners that understand what you're doing. And so we work with Francophonie. Don't work with the cultural department, which doesn't necessarily understand what we're doing, but with the digital department. They came to us. I'd prepared files with OIF. It never worked, but now it's somebody who understands what the free software is all about. They have the same values that we do. And as I said, the challenge is to involve the local partners. That's the challenge. The city halls, the local authorities. I'm sorry, there's a lot of politics in there. It's complicated, but it's or working with institutions that understand what you're doing. The EU, I'll tell you, we're working again on this, but as for the festival, we're working on mapping. Okay, fine, but it's to select the right partners. work with. You've come back on that, and we discussed this with André in our workshop with André and all that, and other people. This notion of responsibility with a view of to the territory. That can be the difference that you have between different incubators, startups, where people will develop a software that they will sell to big multinationals and then just disappear. I think that the difference, as Emmanuel said, is that our mission here at A.M.I. With the Dynamo platform is clearly on a territorial basis. Our main funder is the region, and it's the direction of economy and employment. So we're with our challenge is local development. So this can mean anything. You negotiate with elected representatives, with partners and other incubators, but it's really the point of entry is develop the territory so that artists. We're not involved in we're not an economic player as such, but our objective is really that our artists can survive by using the supports that are around them and make their own region attractive for them. They need to be attracted. You need to be attractive not only for tourists or foreign companies. No, you need to be attractive for these artists who are here. Create a local environment that enable our artists to develop their production, their freedom of speech, and so on. And for this, we need a set of players, actors, enterprises around them that let them produce. And the role of our incubator is exactly that. We are clearly in working on the general and local interest. That's the difference, and that's what I find fascinating with Kër Thiossane is that you do that. No, we're trying to do that. We're fine, but it's hard. But you've been doing this for 10 years without even having, theorized this. But that's the way it is, and with no public money. Well, today, as I told you, we opened up a Fab Lab at, I think it was 30,000 euros, and the Francophonie paid for that. And it creates jobs. But if you involve the populations, you need to involve the populations locally. But the idea has been working on it for 10 years, another for 3 or 4 years, and if we stop, everything was just going to disappear. We helped the city of Dakar to have the label of the digital creative city from UNESCO, but they didn't exactly know what digital creation was. But today, without knowing what it is, we will help them, and that's where the collaboration is interesting. We can accompany other people, change the digital ecosystem. 10 years ago, today everybody has 2 mobile phones and all devices. So there are these are economic opportunities. How you accompany the artists. And then it's the private sector. Nescafé, for example, if it's not Yusundo, the big star, you won't get any money. But today, enterprises are talking, the social responsibility, what we call in French RSE, about talking about social and solidarity and supportive economy. They hear you. So if you're talking about, you have to find your business model and a clear business model to propose. So questions, Daba? I just take this opportunity to congratulate my sister Marion, who's tireless. She's hard-headed, and she never abandons. And for more than 10 years, she really crawled. But please be sure that people know about the work you do. I took part in a meeting with elected representatives, and we took the example of your organization. And I encourage you to really pursue your. Don't abandon. It'll happen. Things will happen. It will be a success. And just again, encourage you and thank you for everything you do for Senegal. Thank you. Great. So I think on these fine words, go wild. for these very powerful women. So now we're going to move to aperobics, which is sort of like the apéritif cocktail time, and we'll resume. So there's Cocotte Minute that will propose their event, and then after lunch break, 2:20 we gather again. 2:20, you know, why 2:20, I don't know. And we'll have the conversation 5, some other powerful people. Thank you very much.